to the first topic. All right.
Whatever, mate.
Live.
All right. Oh, we're live. Okay, folks, a very warm welcome to you all. It is Thursday. It is 8:30, and this is your weekly installment of Mauls, Balls and All. Joining me are familiar faces. We have Peter Martin is joining us. Dara Weston is joining us, and also a veteran podcaster, producer. He does an awful lot of rugby stuff behind the scenes. He has also got an upcoming show which I'm involved with, I admit. Joe Shepherd, how the hell are you all? Are you all well in yourselves? Are you well? Everyone? Anyone?
Amazing.
Above ground, breathing. So that's always a bonus.
Great.
Okay, good stuff. Luke Conway is there. Hi, everyone. How you guys doing? We're all good. Ian Gilbert is watching from Madrid. Hello, Ian. Welcome. Hold on, we're after losing someone there. Megan Augusta, we're after losing. Who did we do? Oh, yeah, we did. Yeah, we lost. He'll be back on. Hold on, 1 sec. Just 1 second now. He's going to reconnect. Now, anyway, gentlemen, from what I have on, this we have. There was one thing that really annoyed everyone. This whole idea of the pathways for the RFU, Joe. And what we saw was I don't think this is going to make any difference, really. That the provinces had to pay, or are obliged to pay 30%. Sorry, they were to 30%, and now they've increased it to 40%, which I don't think is going to make a damn bit of difference to help the pathways for Munster, Connacht, and Ulster. Now, the savings, Joe, are apparently, depending on what article you read, are about 750,000. All right. Now, 750,000 divided between 3 provinces is not really going to make that much of a bloody difference to what they are trying to achieve. And I'll go on to another point about this after. But, Joe, what is it? Is it going to make any difference, really, as you sup your whiskey?
First of all, I looked at this a good couple of months ago, and I've followed this over a number of years now. And I looked at it at a wider point, and I went back to the notes, and I make no apology for going back to the notes because the maths and the money never stack up for me. I mean, I still honestly don't know why Munster, Ulster, and Leinster have a higher ratio of money than Connacht. Nobody can tell me why Connacht get a slightly less. It's improved, but they do still get a proportionately less amount. And I don't know. You guys probably actually know more because I couldn't find it. But when I went back to my notes, I wanted to analyse, if I may, the province breakdown and the whole pathway thing is wider than money. Historically, we've got four provinces, but if you look at the East Coast here, and I have to say, down in Gorey and Wexford, Jesus, I may as well be in Timbuktu because I'm not inside D4. I'm not a prawn sambo eater. So actually, there's 2 parts to Ireland, not 4 provinces. There's Dublin and there's not Dublin. Anybody lives in Dublin, tough shit. That's just my view. That's my experience at 11 years here. But on the East Coast, we're more, it's rugby and it's football orientated. If you then look around Dublin itself, you've got this plethora of private schools. Now, sitting in all of the provincial groups like I do, all I've ever heard is that, the millionaires are throwing money into Leinster. Well, they're freaking not, lads. No, they're not. There may be people with an awful lot of money who are putting money into the schools, and Leinster and the IRFU are not going to tell them, no, you can't do it. It's just part and parcel of the game. It's like your man in Limerick, very well-known gentleman who's a multi-millionaire, decides he's going to put a whole rake of his millions into hurling because it's more GA related over the West Coast and the South than it is. And that's the problem for me, is you're not going to get away from this North, South, East and West. So we've got actually Leinster is a pretty difficult situation in comparison to the other three. I'll tell you why. Ulster have got traditionally 4 schools in their system. Good, good reasonable play pathways, but the clubs and certainly the rural areas, you're not getting too many Tommy Bows from Monaghan coming into Ulster into the academy. So they've got the 4 schools there. So the clubs will suffer, but they've still got it better because it's pretty self-contained. Connacht will take anything they've got because, again, it's a very heavy and relative outsiders' perspective. This, lads, by the way, they will take whatever they've got, including outsiders, because they're losing them to other sports and they're losing them to other provinces as well. Because start there, but people want to go bigger. Munster, again, traditional stronghold of club rugby football, and they've got a whole rake of fee-paying schools as well. But maybe the people who are putting the money into them, the principals of the schools, are saying we need the money to go elsewhere. So you've got all of these geographical situations. You've got the historical situation. You've got the sporting different affiliations as well. So how do you get away from all that? I don't think you ever can. Here's what I would say. I think some of the provinces, and I'm looking at the boys and our friends in red here, which I'll probably be hoofed out the group tonight, but I think they need to look inwards and downwards at how they are structured. How do they help themselves? Is there anybody going out? Look at the academy. And again, Darren, Pete especially, I'm really interested in your thoughts on this. I hear lots about the Leinster Academy, and I know that, and it's not because I live in Leinster, it's because it's promoted. Some of these schools are really effectively sub-academies, rightly or wrongly, that's what it is. I understand who's coming through, and it's not because of Leinster, it's because I hear and read more about it. I try and find out. We have an Ulster rugby roundup show, and yet I can't find out much about the other 3 academies. The other final bit I'd say is the skill set of the coaching staff, the S&C, the same across the piece? And it isn't. So broad, it's a broad amount of things I've brought in rather than just the money, because I think there's a whole pile of variants you can't do. What you can do, and I'll cut straight to the chase on some solutions, a centralised IRFU-led talent ID days in every province with the same people, so you have got the same viewpoint of people who are going to look in each of those problems for what they want. An integrated school club, that was one of the things I did find. There's a lack of coherence between the schools and the club competitions and the calendars and on how they come through. Sorry, the other thing I meant to say about Leinster, I think Leinster is worse off because everything's based around those private schools. The clubs don't really get a look in within the rest of the 12 counties. So if you look at Ross Byrne, for example, private school, he doesn't have to play per se as much. This is a generic statement here. Adam Byrne came from a club, has to work 3, 4, 5 times as hard. Did that contribute, rhetorical question, did that contribute to his early injury because he was a very gifted player? But if he's had to do 3, 4 times, 5 times as much from a club player to get noticed to get in, has that impacted on him? So the final couple of things are increased coach education investment. I've just mentioned there that I don't think the coaching levels, S&C levels across all the provinces are the same, whereas they should be, led by the IRFU. Retention incentives for provinces that develop homegrown talent, clubs and schools, and expanding the formal academy.
Right. Okay. So what you've suggested there, Joe, do you think that's going to solve the issue? I'm struggling with this.
It will, because it will give the IRFU can do some things that perhaps they're not, like the sending the same 4, 6, 8-man team out, whatever, on these individual ID days within the provinces. So you've got the same people knowing what they're looking for on behalf of the pathway coming through. But the provinces need to look inwards and downwards themselves rather than looking upwards and outwards and maybe trying to blame the IRFU. The mothership isn't the problem. The mothership's doing what it can do, but it's going to look after its own. I hate the fact that Leinster have got 7/8 of the Irish squad in it. Why? because I think it's affecting us. That's a different matter completely. But the whole pathway thing it's all interconnected. So I think the other provinces have got a part to play. The IRFU can do some stuff, and I think between them, but the roadmap is not there. The roadmap isn't there, and it could be simplified for me.
Okay, fair enough. Good points, Joe, and well made. Dara Weston, your feeling about this, and like I tend to agree with Joe on some points, but I just think that Munster, Connacht, and Ulster just don't have to use an expletive, and they just don't have their shit together. Dara.
So, okay. Firstly, to Joe's point about why Connacht get less, Connacht have been the poor relation of Irish rugby for years. And when it came to the representation of Blazers on the board of the IRFU, I believe Leinster had 2, Munster had 2, I think Ulster had 1, and Connacht had none. Up until like maybe in the last 10 years, when Connacht actually got a representative on the IRFU board, that they had a permanent representative. So that probably explains why they're still on a little bit less than the rest. Look, if we, and you know, the one thing I will say, Joe, is of all the Leinster supporters who come on this show, myself, Peter, Claire, Matt, there's none of us from D4. There's 2 Southsiders. Claire's from the west. I'm from the north side. I'm from Clontarf, where the 2 highest cap Irish players are from. So, you know, north side.
You had to get that in. You had to get that in.
Well, you know. But, like, I mean, look, the one thing that you're never going to undo is the fact that in Leinster, you have 3 times the population of Munster. You have nearly 10 times the population of Connacht. And I don't know what you have with regards to the population of Ulster. I haven't checked. But, you know, there's about 3 million people in Leinster. There's about 1.5 in Munster. And there's about 1/2 in Connacht. And then maybe 1.5 up north in Ulster. Now, the other thing that other 3 provinces have done when they could have been spending money on strength and conditioning and academies is they've built new stadiums. Now, in fairness, Ulster got a very good deal because they got the government up north to give them 75% of the cost of the Kingspan when they redeveloped it. Now, then they went and put in the 3G pitch, which cost a lot of money. So, I mean, like Leinster, we own Donnybrook, which we're not using, but we're only renting the RDS. And obviously, because we're a tenant there, we're not paying the full redevelopment cost. The RDS are paying that. I assume they'll increase our rent, but, you know, we're not left with a massive bill for the redevelopment. Then, with regards to the players from the club level, I mean, if you look at the Leinster squad, Kieran Frawley is probably the most notable fellow who came in through a club rather than school. But the problem is that when I was growing up, Clontarf did not have any teams between 12 and 18 because everybody was either playing JCT or SCT. So there was nobody to play on a club team. And so a lot of clubs don't. We had Mike Ross on, and he was saying that they had, was it Wesley and Bective, I think, combined, or Bective
That's right,
combined to make an under 14s team because they couldn't get the lads because such was the focus on Junior Cup already at that age. So I think that's why a lot of people aren't coming through. And my final point would be, and again, Joe touched on this, since JP McManus has put a lot of money into Limerick hurling, it's kind of made rugby less attractive in Limerick. And Limerick and Cork, and I'm risking getting locked out of the house tonight by saying this, but probably more so Limerick, have been strongholds of Munster rugby. And that's where all their the majority of their talent has come from. So if you have somebody who's throwing, you know, millions into, you know, hurling there, and, you know, every time the Limerick team win an All-Ireland, they get jetted off to the Bahamas on his private jet for a nice holiday. Why would you play rugby when you could, you know, hurling, try your hand at hurling? So, you know, I'd love to see how that's affecting the number of younger players, you know, kind of going into middle school, you know, going into senior school age. you know, if they're handy, if you're one of these feckers who's good at every sport you try, you might be more tempted to go for hurling than to stick with rugby.
True.
You know?
Okay, I just want to acknowledge Justin Fitzpatrick has joined us. Justin, you're very welcome. How are you?
Thank you, Peter. Apologies for my tardiness.
Not. Oh my God, we just stopped. No, you're grand. Don't worry about it. Justin, hold on. I'll come to you now, Justin, in just 1 second. And the question we are talking about is the pathways, as I sent you, that the IRFU. Sorry, not the IRFU. Munster, Connacht, and Ulster seem to be failing in. That's the question that we're talking about. Peter Martin, I'll come to you. Go on. What do you think? Do you think there's any solution to this, or what is the solution if there is one?
Well, I was going to say after Joe had given his take on it that there's a fair bit to unpack there. Look, I suppose when you're looking at from the Leinster, I suppose we'll start off with what I kind of suppose we know best more about it, which is Leinster. Dara's already pointed about, you know, Kieran Frawley being one of the most notable players in the current setup, Leinster and Ireland, who've come through the club system. Jamie Osborne now is also in that space. Tyke Furlong is there. Look, I'm not going to go on about the players who are club, but it has changed significantly over the last 20 years that the club system is coming through. The Leinster club pathway, shall we say, has improved. It's forever evolving and improving and changing. I've had a couple of conversations with because I'm as some of you know, I'm involved at youth coaching at youth level, and one of the things that has come up, because when you're moving from minis into youth, is that okay, well, you've got guys in minis who are basically, some parents would say, well, Connor and George are off to Clongowes in a couple of years, and whatever the case may be. And it's a question that's come up for us as a coaching group. Is like, okay, look, you know, how do we try to, I suppose, like the schools are there, they're doing what they're doing. How do we get our own kids as good as, you know, prep them as best we can? And I suppose in my own club, we kind of embarked on a bit of a workshop, shall we say, last year. It was supposed to go for a week, but for various different reasons, mostly other sports got involved and dates, whatever, it didn't happen. But the idea and the goodwill was there to try and do some sort of a camp for the best part of a week or so to try and imbue the boys going big boy rugby, where it's a portion of the pitch, to now a full size. And it is a bit of a leap. Obviously, the guys in school, because they're training 4 and 5 times a week, never mind the gym sessions once they get to, you know, junior cert level and beyond, like, you know, it just goes up another level. But there are changes. There are steps being made. What I have been told is an awful lot of the programs that are now being introduced from a coaching space into youth is identical to what's being used at school. The only difference is that, you know, as a coach, you have these kids like 4 times a week as opposed to twice that we would have. So from the pathways perspective, you know, the gap is slowly but surely closing. The other thing I would say as well, and I've, you know, former guest we had on, Mark McHugh, he was one of the forerunners, one of the pioneers, I suppose, himself and Shane Horgan, were amongst those in the early days to come through the club system and get capped. So it is changing. You know, we're getting there. The gap is closing.
But Pete, is it changing fast enough for the Irish rugby public to go, well, okay, I see what's happening here?
Well, look,
I don't think it is.
Well, I think the way it is, it becomes, you know, not getting all philosophical and shit, but like, you're ultimately the product of your environment. If you're in an environment where where rugby is surrounding you, and if you're in a private school, right, it is pretty much, if it's in that ethos, if you're in Clongowes, if you're in St. Michael's, it's right there. You go onto St. Michael's website, and that's what it's all about, is the blood, is the rugby. Yeah. Like they mention other sports, but like, you know, and then it goes into the classroom as well, because years ago you had teachers who basically put down the duster and the chalk and the whatever, and picked up the whistle and went out and coached as well. That's no longer the case. And I suppose this is where the issue is, coming back to Joe's point about the money and so on, is that now the schools, because they're fueled by all this money, by wealthy parents, blah, blah, so on and so forth, there are professional coaches now that are basically being, there are guys who are coming in, they're like the teachers are staying in the classroom, which is a problem in one respect as well. And the boys are going out and they're being coached by professional coaches. So you got guys coming straight from, guys who are already players in the Leinster Academy are coming out or standing on the pitch, have got the pads and the whole lot ready, pitches lined out, the cones are down, and it's straight into training. So
okay.
That's much of what's happening there, I think.
Okay, good point. Good points, Pete. Justin, welcome. Your thoughts on the apparent failure of Connacht, Munster, and Ulster's pathways, that they just now, Justin, just to clarify, but because we touched on this last week on the show, Leinster, Munster, and Ulster get 8 million from the IRFU. Connacht slightly less; they get 6.2 million. So there is a kind of a shortfall for Connacht, but the pathway succession for bringing players into, albeit academies or be it into the IRFU, doesn't seem to be working for the other three provinces other than Leinster. Justin, what are your thoughts on that?
Well, is it not working, or is it working exceptionally well in Leinster? Right, I would ask that question.
Good point. Good point.
And I think when you look, and we discussed this last time I was on the show a little bit, and I can't remember exactly what the watershed moment was, whether it was winning the European Cup or getting into a semi-final, but I remember reading at the time that a large chunk of the extra money that was received by Leinster through the branch was directly invested back into its development pathway, right? And that's a choice. And and you posed the question, will the public wait? What the public, and again, and all of us have to understand is, right, you have to fill the pipe to get something to come out of it at the other end, right? Otherwise it's ad hoc. It's not coming through. What Leinster have done really, really well is they've invested, they've continued to invest. They've got a very good school structure. They've lent on that. As was mentioned, you've got a lot of paid professionals now within that structure. And I had a very interesting, to come into this to understand the problem or the question better. I spoke to Hugh McGackie, the Ulster CEO, and he raised a very interesting point. At the moment, you've probably got 16, 17 full-time DORs in Leinster. You've got 2 in Ulster, right? So there's, so there are some different things. So you've got to start where you are, and I think and I can speak more to Ulster, as that's where I played most of my career, and and having spoken with Hugh, and I was very impressed with the vision, the plan of what's happening. I mean, they've just secured €300,000 from the RFU through a matching grant. Are going to be putting in roughly £500,000 sterling into 12 to 18-year-old player pathways, schools, clubs, professionals, so on and so forth, right? But that does not deliver a solution tomorrow or next season, or it has to build as it's built with Leinster. Now we find ourselves in a situation where Leinster have the majority of the Irish team. They're filling out stadiums. They're having success every year, and that is not exclusively, but largely, in my opinion, because of the decisions they made a period of time ago. So, at least, and I'm sure Munster and Connacht are attacking the problem in their own way. But speaking to what Ulster are doing, I think while it won't necessarily change the results of this season, or perhaps not next season in terms of young players coming through, over time that kind of forward thinking will deliver.
Right. Okay. Hold on. Now, Justin, I was having a look. There's a total of 246 schools in this country that play rugby, right?
Mm-hmm.
In Ulster, there's 107. In Leinster, there's 75. Munster, there's 41. And in Connacht, there's 23. So Ulster are leading the way in schools that play rugby. So QED, Ulster should have more players coming through. So why is that not happening?
So, well, yes and no, and I think that bodes very well for the future. The fact that there are that number of schools, and this is just my personal opinion, but I think there's been very much a very singular focus on winning the schools cup in Ulster, and not necessarily developing players or giving them the tools that they need to make that transition. And that transition gets bigger and bigger every year, right? And hence, why he was saying, he didn't say 16 to 18, he said 12 to 18. They've got to get them young, and they've got to start developing them and broadening that base so that you can identify and pick up the ones with the physical and technical and tactical nous at the appropriate stage, and track them through, right? So I think that's positive. But as I also said, there's 16 to 17 full-time DORs in Leinster. There's 2 in Ulster, and to an earlier point, that gives and it takes, right? I was reading a very interesting article. If you look at South African rugby, the big traditional big schools have all got full-time staff and all the rest of it, and there's a downside to that. But in terms of a pure rugby standpoint and giving the young players, those players in the system, the best possible route and expertise to succeed, well then having professionals in there, I think, is a game changer. And hopefully through the initiative that Ulster are doing, that will make the difference. And that, when we have this conversation in 3 or 4 or 5 years time, there'll perhaps be a narrowing of that 16, 17 to 2.
No, I know the point you're making, but Justin, hold on. Before we move on, I have to ask. You were saying Leinster have all these DORs. If Ulster had the same amount of DORs, would that make a difference?
I don't necessarily say that it solves everything, but it certainly helps. I mean, as you said, I mean, I'm a great believer you can't be half pregnant in life. You're either doing something or not doing something.
You said that the last time you were on. You said that the last time you were on.
Yeah, it's I think it's a truism, right? And while, as I said, and it's probably for another time, there is a downside potentially of removing teacher coaches out of the top end of the system and introducing professionals. There's no doubt in my mind that having people that have a higher level of knowledge and expertise through the things that they've seen done and been involved with can rapidly increase and close the gap between the provinces, which is what we want, right? We all want to see an Irish team that is continuing to be successful, that is improving.
Leinster, Justin. Leinster, yeah, Grant. Yeah.
Okay, well, this is awkward. But all jokes aside, that's what we want. Yeah. Now, I think it's self-evident that if there's more competition between the 4 provinces, as there have been in previous years, right? We look. It's not that far back that Munster were the guiding light, and these things are a little bit cyclical. But there's no doubt in my mind that Leinster, through their efforts, have taken themselves away from the pack. Right now, that's great. You've got that first leader advantage, but everybody else can look and see and evolve what they've been doing, and that's what Hugh was outlining to me, which I was very impressed with, and can close that gap and perhaps make it more Munsterfied or Ulsterfied or Connacht, because each of the provinces have their own advantages and disadvantages, so the solution is not necessarily cookie cutter.
Right. Okay. Good points, Justin, and well made. Okay, moving on. Sorry, just a few
Peter,
comments.
just one thing on that.
Yeah, go on.
One advantage that Ulster would have also in the number of schools is, I know, okay, this is a bit of an ecumenical matter getting into this now, but I'll just quickly say it, is a certain proportion of their schools wouldn't have GAA competing with rugby.
Yeah,
So,
yeah.
you know, so you have more players going through rugby. Whereas,
Yeah.
you know, nearly every school in Leinster and Munster has to have GAA, be it hurling, Gaelic football. So, you know, there's an advantage there that Ulster could have as well for the future.
Look,
I would 100% agree with that. But I would also say there's an opportunity, and and I know that there has been some success stories. I've seen it with my own eyes in going into some of these traditionally strong GAA games. The fact of the matter is, there's a place for everyone in rugby, all shapes and sizes. That's not necessarily the case with other sports. So some guy who's been through another sport system, whether it be soccer or GAA or whatever, may not, maybe built like me and Joe and not necessarily tiered to success within that, but there's a place for you in rugby, and we come on board. So I think for Ulster, there's a really great opportunity to strengthen what's already there, which is not, it's not broken but can be better, and also to make more forays into the other side of the community there and bring people through. And there's been some good examples of that.
GAA should be banned. Ridiculous sport.
Peter, just before you move on, I know I'm
Yes.
putting the mockers on you there. But just, you're throwing out the number of schools in Leinster, the rugby playing schools. How many of them are traditional rugby playing schools? The reason why I ask is because when I did my Leaving Cert back in the mid-90s, my school that I played in the first rugby team that came out of that school. They had only just introduced rugby into it. So my point is, you've got traditional, and then you've got other schools, non-traditional, who've now picked up the game, and that's where my question lies: is that are your stats based upon the traditional schools, or are they based on the other schools, the community schools, and so on that are don't have the tradition?
I have no fucking idea. Right.
He paid somebody to Google it for him. He didn't even Google it himself.
I just wanted to just put it out there. Didn't think it would.
Grand job. Okay. All right. I don't fucking know. I don't know. Anyway,
Peter doesn't do his own research. He has people to do that for him.
I don't do my... No, I do not. Jesus Christ. Okay, hold on. One sec before we move on, and I'll come to you, Joe, on the next point. Alan Dorman, evening all. Danny Brosnan... what's Danny Brosnan? All right, lads. Dara, got your favourite jersey on. Okay. Eli Willoughby, evening chaos. Yes, that's exactly what it is. Yes. Scarood, Len, evening all. How are you, Len? Alan Dorman, Munster Rugby abandoned their greatest feeder or players when they turned their back on club rugby instead of creating a system where both club and schools players would come through the system. I don't know. Joe, what do you think? What would you say to that?
I think it goes back to the geography again, and the fact that ultimately, for me, I think you've got to have a mix of schools and club. And that comes back down to changing the mindset of things. It's really, really interesting. And just we're going to take this offline and talk about the whole Ulster thing, which I've got a strong interest in, because I didn't know half of that. Certainly the number of schools and the number of percentages and stuff like that. But I think it really says what Peters has commented on there, is that it is a mindset. That there is a change between, traditional and new almost. I go back to I'm sorry, Munster lads, if you're going to fall out with me, but I think there's an awful lot that Munster can do themselves in-house that potentially they're not doing at the moment, which by the sounds of it, Hugh is doing up with Ulster, looking ahead in that way.
Right, okay. Dara, would you agree with Alan Dorman's comment there about what Munster are doing, or no?
You trying to get me fucking killed, are you? There's more lads in London.
By the way, folks, Dara is saying this because his wife is from Cork. So he's
Wife is
contractually
a
obliged.
lawyer from Cork who specialises in criminal fucking murder cases.
There you go.
Um,
That's why Dara is hesitant.
Well, it's probably like lads like the Claw wouldn't have probably gone to secondary
Say a few
school. So
prayers
hence
for
he
you, Harry,
came
grand.
through the, you know, I mean, if you went to Young Munster, and there was probably a lot of lads there never went to fucking secondary school. They just spent their time hanging around the clubhouse drinking cans. No, but in all seriousness, as I do believe it's very hard for clubs to compete with schools. So, you know, we had Mike Ross on. He went to a gas school. He was in Fermoy rugby. He went to UCC.
And we were very sympathetic to
and
Mike.
then he went to Munster for 1 year, and then they were like, okay, no, you're grand, thanks. So he went to Harlequins, and then he came to Leinster for nearly 10 years and won shitloads. But now, the time he was with Munster was when Munster were still had all their classics, you know, and I don't think they would have had Dougie Howlett back then. But anyway, it was pre-Dougie Howlett. So look, I think it is hard for clubs to field teams during the school years, to field teams, you know, between like 14, 18, when you start getting to JCT and Senior Cup. And then, you know, so if the clubs aren't fielding those players, the scouts from the provincial academies aren't going to go to the clubs. Because if, you know, the clubs can't get a team together, there's nothing for the scouts to look at, so they'll go to the schools. So it's one of those ones, it's hard to kind of say. So I'm going to do a Reedy and just sit in the fence on this.
Reedy never sits on the fucking fence. Reedy is straight up, this is how it is. You know, that's the way it is. Peter Martin, any thoughts on this? Or
well, I was just going to go on a slight tangent as we're inclined to do. I think, you know, the situation in Munster is that GA has kind of gone this direction, you know, as a trend, as a winning sport. And like at the end of the day, we all want to back a winner. You know, like the colour of blue has been the winning colour in Munster for the best part of 10 plus years, between Leinster doing the business, winning the cups, the Champions Cup, and then you've got Dublin, who've basically kind of fallen away recently on the gas side of things. So I think it really does, like, everybody wants to be associated with winner. Everybody wants to, and like that's where it's at, I think, really with Munster at the moment, because Limerick have kind of, you know, kind of divided and conquered everyone in their path, and there is a bit more competition in that space. It's more interesting. Like Leinster GAA is goddamn boring because there's only Dublin, really, even though there's other counties are starting to close the gap, including Louth and a couple of others. But like, that's where you're talking about capturing the imagination. People back a winner, and they want to see the team that appeared in the 6 o'clock news lifting the cup. People saying yes, and little Johnny and little Mary and all the kids. I want to do that. And next minute, and mum and dad bring them up and put them in front of you know, bring them down to the local club, whatever that may be.
Okay, Justin.
A classic example of what Peter's saying there is, you look at 10 years ago, the amount of young kids that wanted to do UFC, whereas compared to today, I'd say it's fallen off a cliff now. You know, and we won't mention any names, but it's exactly what Peter was saying. It's what Peter's saying. It's pop culture. It's if something is incredibly successful, people are drawn towards it. Anyway,
all right, okay, yeah, great.
I'm going above your head. I can see that.
Yeah, you are. Yeah, you've lost me, Justin. Any truth in what Alan Dorman said there, that Munster Rugby have abandoned the greatest feeder of players when they turned their back on club rugby? Would you agree with that?
I see the point that Alan's making. I would say this, and to re-emphasise what I mentioned a moment ago, I think the solution for each of the provinces, can we learn things from Leinster? Yes, but Leinster have have always had a very strong school system, and they've built on that, and it's taken time, and that's feeding through. I think the solution for each of the provinces is, while we can learn things from the Leinster model, is going to be specific to that province. Yes, there's some things that can be copied, and there's no doubt about it, right? I mean, Munster club rugby, was an absolute powerhouse for the likes of the Shannons, the Cook Cons, the Gary Owens, back in the 90s and early noughties. I mean, that they were bringing thousands of supporters up into the north, for All Ireland League games. The landscape slightly changed. Is that part of the solution? I would absolutely think so. And more than that, if you think about it, if we're going to grow the base across the game, which the RFU and the provinces, and we've all got a stakeholders a part to play in that. The broader that base gets, right, the more people are going to be plucked out to go up in retrospective levels to play for Leinster, Ulster, Munster, Connacht, and for Ireland. But if we do the job well, all of us as stakeholders, we're also getting a larger proportion of that bigger test bed at the bottom falling into becoming the next club player. Could be the third 15 guy, doesn't matter. Could be the first 15 guys played there 10 years. Could be the club coach. Could be the youth coach. Could be an administrator. Could be the branch official. And there's no downside in growing that base. And I think that's something we really need to keep focused on. Apologies about the dog.
All right. Calm down, dog. Calm down. Okay, thanks, Justin. Len, I'm not going to call you Scrooge Two-Tone. Len, very good point, Peter. I think that's talking to you, Peter Martin. There are lots of schools which may be marked as rugby schools, but quite possibly struggle to field a single team. All right. Joe Lyons, our old pal Joe Lyons, here he goes. He's on around. The GAA have flexed their muscles in recent years in Munster. 13 million in funding has been allocated to local and community grassroots sports clubs in Limerick alone. Add to that the JP money and the 4 AIs in the last 5 years, increase in funding too in Cork and Clare. The increase is greater in Limerick alone than the whole of the IRFU's assigned budget to Munster. I was not aware of that. Was anyone aware of that? I was certainly.
Peter, look, the way it is, the GAA just has that extra reach, right? That's just it. At the end of the day, like I'm based in Drogheda. There's one rugby club, and there's 7 or 8 GAA clubs around the town.
Right.
That's just it. That is just it. And it only takes a small amount of cash and a bit of time for more volunteers, and all of a sudden you've got an uplift in kids playing that particular sport.
Okay,
and
brilliant.
By participation numbers, the GAA are one of the biggest recipients of lottery grants as well. GAA clubs, because they have there's probably a couple of thousand GAA clubs all over Ireland, where there's probably, I think we said before, 200 or 300 rugby clubs in all of Ireland.
Yeah.
So
that's all. Okay. Moving on. Okay, forget about that. Right, moving on. Joe Shep. There is rumours that Caelan Doris will not be. He will not be. But there are rumours about his captaincy for the Lions. Brian O'Driscoll thinks that he's not mouthy enough. Would you agree with that assessment with Bod, or would you completely disagree with that? And if so, who the hell is going to step in as captain? Joe?
Yeah, I would disagree with Bod actually on this occasion. I think that currently there's 2 people that you're looking at. One is Caelan and one is Maro. Maro will start at 4. Caelan will start at 8. Maro.
I don't agree with you, Joe. I don't agree. I think Maro Itoje is shite.
Maro is a very, very physically dominating, gifted player who lives on the edge. But
he's a walking fucking penalty, Joe. He's a walking penalty.
But if what gives him that capabilities as a quality world-class lock is also what makes him not suitable to be a captain. And we've seen this in sports many, many times before, where people like that are made captains and it takes a complete focus off the game and makes them even worse. So for me, it doesn't matter about the fact that Maro's had 2 Lion tours before, so 17 and 21. Caelan hasn't. I think Caelan brings, and this is where I fundamentally disagree with Bod, and I'm surprised at Bod. Caelan Doris is a leader. He's a modern leader. He doesn't have to shout and bawl and be mouthy. He gives you that quiet assuredness. You know, he is all over the park. His carrying, his skill set, his situational awareness for an 8. Half the time, his head's not in. He is looking up until the end second at the end. Most 8s will go in. He is there looking around, looking at where the play. He's doing like a centre. He could play a centre and play very, very well for me. He has got a situational awareness. He's looking around everywhere. And it's that assuredness that you don't need a mouthy skipper. He is up to the ref and he is proportionate. And it's like conflict resolution. 1 is verbal, 5 is lethal. You don't have to come in at 4.75 like some skippers do and get in your face. You know, you don't need that. Caelan Doris is a modern leader for me. Exemplifies himself on the park. He's been brilliant for Leinster, brilliant for Ireland, in a leadership role as well. And that's what we need going forward. So anything about the fact that he doesn't understand, you know, maybe the Lions dynamics or the off-field, he's widely respected across. You listen to any of the Six Nations players talk about him, he is hugely, hugely respected. And I think that really gives him the edge that you need going to Australia, into the Southern Hemisphere, where he can play, he can focus on his play, he can win the respect of everybody else around him on the field and off the field. He wins the respect of the officials, and we've seen that time and time again. Hands down, for me, that there isn't necessarily another captain capability there. You could look at Dan Sheehan, but I wouldn't want to give that to Dan. I want Dan to go and play his same thing. But he, by the way, is a future leader. But we're talking about skippers now, and the 2 that are really in the frame. The only outside bolter for a captain is what the hell happens to OF? I don't want to even say his name in public. Yeah, man, Owen, because I'll just go into meltdown. No, exactly. No. So for me, Caelan Doris will make an exemplary skipper in both playing, in both capabilities, in both stature and leadership, in that quiet, assured way that we've seen him do. And for me, even if I wasn't Irish, I would want Caelan Doris. For everybody I've seen that is potentially going to be in that Test 15.
All right. Okay. There's someone agreeing with you, Joe. Bevan Marie. I agree with Joe. Okay. Thanks, Bevan. Dara Weston, would you agree with what Joe just said there about this question mark over Caelan Doris as Lions captain?
Did Bod happen to make this comment on Off the Ball?
He did, yeah.
Yeah, well then, clickbait. Look, I mean, there has been some criticism of Caelan that he's not as vocal sometimes with referees, and he can be a bit hesitant approaching the ref.
That's what Bod was saying. That's what Bod was saying.
Yeah, but he is growing into that role. I mean, if you want somebody really mouthy who's not going to give away penalties, then just put Finn Russell as captain. You can't get a bigger mouth.
Fuck off! No, go away.
No, but in all seriousness, like he put Austin Healy to shame. So, but yeah, no, I think Caelan, he's measured. Maybe he's not as dramatic as other people when it comes to going to the ref, and maybe when we're dealing with some of these Southern Hemisphere refs, that we'll find on a Lions tour, we might need that. So that could be where he's coming from. But I think in terms of respect to the players, the one thing, there's going to be a lot of Irish players on this tour. And the one thing, the big thing that Itoje did to dirty his chances was the little trip on Mac Hansen. And I think he immediately kind of nearly fucked up his chances of any kind of captaincy with that.
I would tend to agree. Yes,
because he lost the respect of all the Irish players, and I'm sure some of the other nations players as well.
I don't rate Itoje at all. I don't rate
But
him.
I think Caelan can stand up and do the job. It's something he's constantly evolving in his work with referees. So, because he doesn't have to really fucking improve his rugby game. That's pretty much spot on. So, I think he can make a very good captain. And look, I wouldn't be surprised if they took 10 minutes of what Bod said and took a 5-second quote out of it, knowing those chancers.
No. I listened to the whole thing. He said that. It wasn't taken out of context. Anyway, Peter Martin, before I come to you, Joe Lyons. Hi, Joe. There's a huge media push on Itoje, but personally, I'll say Jamie George is and would be a great shout. One that could appease the English if, as expected, the Lions is Irish heavy. Okay. Peter Martin, your thoughts on this? Caelan Doris, he's not mouthy enough, as Bod said, for the Lions captain.
Okay, I think there's two bits to this. Doris took over as Irish captain there at the end, basically for the autumn series of tests, right? And as we all kind of previously discussed, and I think broadly agreed, if you were rating Ireland out of 10, we'd probably give them a 6.5 or a 7 overall. Like, it was just basically we got the job done, but overall performances were pretty damn poor. I think part of that as well was the handover of the captaincy, and that's where Doris was kind of taken over from Peter O'Mahony. And I think, O'Mahony didn't, if I stand to be correct in this, O'Mahony played very little, if anything, in the autumn series, and therefore perhaps Doris was a little bit, as what Bod has probably said, maybe he was a little bit hesitant coming forward and kind of saying something to ref, where had O'Mahony been on the pitch straight up, probably a little bit more confident and forthright in expressing an opinion. I think the other thing is that Doris has definitely grown into it. I think there was a clip at one stage in the match against France where things were getting, I can't remember the exact stage in the game it was, but it was getting a little bit fraught. There was a few things happening. And Angus Gardner, I think from recollection, was the referee. And he basically was caught on the referee's mic, and he said, I've heard a lot from you. Or he said something, Gardner said to Doris, I've heard a lot from you already. And Doris said, this is my second interaction with you. And Gardner kind of took a second and said something along the lines of fair. So he's like, to say that Doris he's getting there. He's certainly getting there. And as Joe's already said, he's not the confrontational, coming in huff and puff and blowing, saying, ref, come on, the fuck, like what's kind of happening here. The other thing I think that needs to be addressed as well is, and maybe this is more of a conversation, is in every team, every rugby team, international, and even going into the lower standards and lower levels, you have a leadership group. I think that's more the conversation as regards Itoje is going to be in the leadership group. Let's call it a spade. I think obviously Doris is going to be there. I think Dan Sheehan, because I think it goes without saying he's going to be nailed on as one of the hookers that's going. And there'll be possibly one or two others. You're going to have like a group of 3, 4, maybe 5 who are going to be basically kind of in a leadership group, and they're all going to be supporting each other, but just Doris will probably end up wearing the armband. Let's call a spade a spade. He'll be the guy actually talking to the referee. But that's the way the game has gone. And I just think it's a little bit, it's a little bit, I suppose, clannish really to kind of say, well, so one person over the other. It's ultimately, at the end of the day, I think having someone like Itoje is going to play a massive part. I think possibly what Joe kind of lent on something there. I think if Itoje plays and he has the leadership voice and he's able to say his piece in the huddle under the sticks when there's whatever is happening, I think it'll free him up to be a better player than he currently is, or it'll give him that freedom without basically having to kind of hold back 10% on his game. Like,
I don't think listen. I think Itoje wears Tyke Burns underpants. That's it. Justin, your thoughts on this whole idea that Caelan Doris, a doubt, as Bod said, as I said to Joe and Dara and Pete, that he's not mouthy enough. Is that a prerequisite for a captain of a Lions squad, Justin? Justin, play on your microphone.
My apologies.
There you go.
I think it really comes down to how the playing group and how the coach sees it. And what we have with Farrell is someone that knows both players inside and out. Farrell was at Saracens. Josie's been there, man and boy. Would have worked with him with the England squad, and now with Doris with the Irish squad. So he strikes me, and everything that I've heard about him lends it to this, is very much knows his own mind, very much knows what he wants from the team, how he's going to construct it, obviously to form and fitness, which we've seen over the last X number of weeks, he's got it there. And that captain is going to fit that mold of what he wants from that group. Now, I don't think, look, would it be great as an Irishman to have an Irish captain lead the British and Lions, from a clannish point of view? Absolutely. But I personally don't think there's a bad choice between the two of them. I think they are in different ways both very can bring a lot to the party, and I think that whichever direction they choose, I don't think there's a bad choice between them. I really don't, And out of the other ones that have been mentioned, Jamie George was mentioned there. I happen to think he's quite a good captain, but will he start? I have my doubts with it, where I believe Doris and Ajoje will be in that squad. And yes, I think to Peter's point, there's going to be a leadership group there, but that's also going to be led and directed by the vision of the coach and the staff, right? And it's an Irish heavy coaching staff. It's likely to have a good chunk of Irish players. We're pretty optimistic and hopeful for that. And within that, there's the playing style, there's the what you want from the captain, but there's also the balance of the squad as well. So that may come into a play as to how that mix is, so you don't have a clique. And we've seen this in Lions tours before. Generally, when there's been a large English group within there, that it hasn't always balanced and mold. But again, as I said, I think you've got someone that knows both of those gentlemen inside and out, and is going to make
Justin, let me ask you, really, do you actually rate Maro Itoje as a lock?
100%.
Do you? All right. Yeah. Okay. Well,
work rate. He's an incredible athlete. He's got a lot of experience. He's been there, seen it, done it. Now, again, that's just my opinion. And you can go back and forth as to should somebody else take that spot or not within the playing group, and if so, or if that's a doubt in Farrell's mind, then he's not going to be the captain, right? In the same way that in my mind, I would rule out Jamie George. I don't think Jamie George is a good player or would be a great captain, but is he going to start? I have my doubts. And again, here's the thing. Here's the lovely thing about touring, and especially with the Lions, you're going to have some bolters come up from the back that we haven't thought about. Perhaps not necessarily for captain, but for starting places. We saw that in '97 with Paul Wallace and to a lesser extent Jeremy Davidson, right? That came out that weren't necessarily in all the experts' minds before the first few games, and they came through and were standouts.
Yeah, true. Joe, would you rate Maro Itoje?
Oh, massively. He is absolutely a gifted, physically proficient, technically proficient. He is one of the best locks I have ever had the pleasure. But he lives on the edge, and that edge sometimes takes him over the edge, and it's like anything. If you do something that looks bad, then another 99.9% of the stuff you do is wasted. But he is brilliant. And him and Byrne will be starting 4 and 5. And that then has... He's brilliant, mate. He's just gifted and brilliant, but he's not the temperament, I don't think. But I agree with Peter. There's a leadership group. Actually, there might be a tour captain who's not the test captain, by the way.
That's true, actually. But come here, Joe. Do you think Atoje is a better lock than John McCarthy?
Yes, he is. Yeah. Overall, he is. Yeah, Joe hasn't matured enough for me yet.
All right. Okay, fair enough. All right. Now, okay, let's just end that. We go on to our because we're fast approaching the hour mark. Just one more topic before we go into win, lose, or draw for the games coming up. Joe, dedicated fan zones in stadiums. I put a post up on LinkedIn. I put up in the group. I just think it's an absolutely ridiculous idea. Joe, your thoughts on dedicated fan zones in rugby stadiums? I think it's stupid.
Yeah, listen, none of us really know the fully fundamental behind why they're trying to do it. They're not trying to do it, and that's the problem. If things are explained to people, and then they can make an informed decision, but they're not. One of the best things that we do, there is the South Wales Ulster Rugby supporters group, who run the fan zones. I've been at them. Obviously, Chris Brownfield and the whole of the lads, part of the Ulster thing, run those. They're brilliant. They bring opposing fans together. When they're going to a game, they say, right, where are we all going to sit? So they have the fan zone. They take over the local pub. They do all of that stuff together. But they want to sit together so they can have a voice together as their fans. But they don't want to be segregated in the same way as this football mentality has to be, because the scum is out there who just want to scrap with each other. So I think it's missing the point completely. What we should be doing is espousing the likes of the fan zones that South Wales Ulster Rugby Club do, because it's brilliant. It's the way to go. Other clubs do it. We just don't talk about it. And instead, it goes back to this 1% again. We're focusing on, it's been badly explained. It's a crap shit idea. It doesn't going to work. What we need to do is understand why fans get together in an away game, because it's that sense of identity. If anything goes wrong in an away game, you're here with us all together. We all sit together. But that, somebody put a photograph up on one of the things there with a Leinster fan pouring a beer for an Ulster fan.
That was me.
Brilliant. That's what we do in rugby, but it's been explained wrong. And what we should be doing is saying, ignore that bollocks, create fan zones and have the RFU and the IRFU promote fan zones from within the clubs.
All right. Okay. Dara Weston, your thoughts on this whole fan zone idiotic idea, in my view?
I don't think there's anything that needs to be enforced there. It's the same with the Leinster Supporters Club. They'll advise people, if you're going to watch a game in La Rochelle, this is the area we'll be booking our tickets in. So get more Leinster fans in the same place, make it sound louder when they're all chanting. This is the pub we'll be going to, stuff like that. But you don't need it. You don't need a formal segregation of fans. In the immortal words of Nigel Owens, this is not soccer.
Yeah. All right. Okay. Peter Martin, your thoughts on this ridiculous idea or a good idea or whatever?
Well, look, we all want fans to have a good time. I think it's like not delving into the Leinster Supporters Club too much, but yeah, look, it's about being organised and doing it in a safe and kind of common sense kind of way, espousing the values of rugby, and making sure everybody has a good time and safe, and that they aren't going to end up butchering, a good pop song and making it into their own chant kind of thing. It's about doing it right. So look, I can see the idea of what they're trying to do, but ultimately, comparing it to if they're going to go down the soccer route, it's going to fail horribly and badly, and that's the end of it.
Okay, Justin, your thoughts on dedicated fan zones?
I would totally agree with what everything's been said so far. I'm firmly against it. I think I've seen what most of the clubs do in terms of organising when they're away, to having groups if you want to be, or not if you don't, right? And I think that's working well. I think to segregate people away takes the essence of the sport, the camaraderie, and I think that's part of it. I think when it first dawned on me, I think it was 15 or 16, going to the old Parc de France in Paris, and watching a game, and sitting surrounded by Frenchmen, all all drinking. I think watching one fella go down to the bottom of the stand, pull out a rooster from his trouser and put it on the pitch. I mean, just madness, right? And and that left an indelible mark on me. And it's great banter being amongst the opposition. I don't think there's any problem that I'm aware of, and I think this will be counterintuitive to the sport.
Very good. I totally agree with you. Okay. Right, folks, we're over the hour mark, and now we're on to our win, lose, or draw for the games coming up this weekend. Justin, Cardiff are entertaining Munster.
Munster. I think they'll run a train on them.
All right, hold on. Let me get my pen. Munster. Okay, so Justin JF is going for Munster. Okay. In the order that they're happening, the Scottish women are taking on the Irish women in Scotland.
Irish women. I think it'll be a good game, but I think we're too strong for them.
Okay. The Lions are entertaining Connacht. Justin.
That's a more difficult one. Going that far. I'm going to go with Connacht. I think their need is great, but it's hard to go on the veldt and win. But I'm going to go with my heart and say Connacht.
All right. Okay. Scarlets are entertaining Leinster. Justin.
Yeah, well, everyone's going to be playing to be somewhere within that 23 against Northampton. So Leinster comfortably, I think.
Okay. Big score or middle of the road, or
I think it'll be a big score. I mean, I doubt very much that it's all the starters, but from what I've observed this last couple of seasons, those guys, and we kind of sort of touched upon this, the pipeline's really hot, and they've got a lot of strength in that squad, and they're all playing to be involved in that cup semi-final. So I think they'll put on a masterclass.
Okay, and lastly, Justin. Ulster are entertaining the Sharks, your old team, Ulster.
Yeah, tough one, right? The Sharks are having a good season, but again, like I said with Connacht, I think the need is great, and I think people underestimate coming to Ravenhill. So I think we'll pull one out of the bag this weekend.
Okay, good stuff. Joe Shep. To you, Cardiff entertaining Munster. Who's winning that?
100% Munster.
All right. Okay, calm down, will you? Jesus Christ, you're jumping in there. Right. Hold
Ireland.
I haven't even fucking asked you yet. Stop. So the Scottish women are entertaining Ireland. So you're going for Scotland.
What are they? Oh, Ireland then.
You're going for Ireland. Okay. All right. Lions entertaining Connacht. Joe.
Yeah, Connacht.
Really, Connacht? Okay.
Yeah, I think they're going to travel well and do a job on the road. They really want it.
All right. Well, what they do need it, Joe. Scarlets versus Leinster, Joe.
Leinster, but I think will struggle a little bit and then sort of put the margins on them. Not struggle, but I think we'll be a bit slower. But the strength and depth we've shown of late, whoever we bring in, is just immense. So I think it will be second half we'll pull away, but yeah, easy victory. It's got to be.
So probably the last 20, Joe, or something like that.
Yeah, I think so, mate. Yeah, really. The last 20, last 30 will pull away massively.
All right. Okay. And finally, Joe, Ulster
Ulster.
are entertaining the Sharks.
Oh, Ulster. They're massively improved of late. They've been very unlucky. The only downside is they're carrying a lot of injuries after the last few weeks. But their pack, they really need some help on a side issue. There may are a few on the props. They really, really do. It's almost dangerous situation now. But I think that they pull out like they played in Bordeaux. I've been impressed with Ulster of late. They've just been slightly unlucky, and the injuries aren't there. But I think they'll take the Sharks.
All right. Okay. Dara Weston. Win, lose, or draw. Cardiff entertaining Munster.
Munster.
Is that because you're contractually obliged to say Munster?
Yes, I'm contractually obliged to say Munster.
Yeah, because your wife is from Cork. Okay.
Yeah.
All right. Grand job. Contract signed. The Irish women are away to Scotland, Dara.
After my prediction last week that they do Wales, I think they'll do Scotland as well. So,
right.
Girls in green.
Okay. Lions are entertaining Connacht.
It's going to be very tough for Connacht. I'd love to see them scrape it. I think if they get it, it'll be by the skin of their teeth. But I'd love to see Connacht do it.
Mm.
Okay. Scarlets are entertaining Leinster, Dara.
I don't think the Scarlets will be doing much entertaining. I think it'll be Leinster.
All right. And finally, Ulster are entertaining the Sharks.
Yeah, I think Ulster have had some good performances recently. South African teams they can always be a bit iffy when they travel. So I'm hoping Ulster will do the job and go for Ulster.
All right, fair enough. Peter Martin, last excuse me, last voice on the show. Glad someone's dishwasher has stopped spinning. Peter Martin, your thoughts? Win, lose, or draw. Cardiff entertaining Munster, Pete.
Yeah, I think Munster, providing
All right.
there isn't a fuck up with the refereeing.
I don't know that was a topic. It was too long.
Yeah.
The Scottish women playing the Irish women. Pete.
Yeah, I think the Irish girls are going to do it.
Okay, Lions entertaining Connacht.
I think that's going to be one of the most entertaining games of the weekend because the Lions, for me, are the most un-South African of the South African teams. They're not physically big and they chuck the ball around a little bit more than the other teams. They rely less on brute force and more on a bit more of a panache. But I will back the boys in green, the lads out west, to do a job on them.
Okay. Scarlets entertaining Leinster, Pete.
Thoughts and prayers for Scarlets. I think it's worth noting, and I only just came to realise it myself, that the shadow team that Leinster put out recently are actually playing well. Like, this is something I get brought up before, that, you had the shadow Leinster team go out and they beat the Dragons, whoever, and it was an absolutely shite game to watch. But they still managed to win by 5-10 points, and everybody's like, you're left at the 80th minute going, oh, great, we won, but it was absolutely dire. But anyway, look, that's just to get that out of the way.
Okay, and Ulster at home to the Sharks, Pete.
Yeah, as was already been mentioned, Ulster have a shitload of injuries, a little bit unlucky. I thought they were a bit limited in how they were playing against Leinster last weekend, relying an awful lot on Jack Murphy with kick and Jack Murphy's kicks. Look, home advantage is worth 5 points, as we said we'd be here before. So, yeah, Ulster at home.
All right. Okay. Very good. Gentlemen, my thanks. We must end the show now because we're way over time as always. My thanks are to Dara Weston, Peter Martin, a good mate, Joe Shepherd, and as always, a good friend to us, to the show, and also Rook This, Justin Fitzpatrick. Gentlemen, enjoy the rest of your evening, and I'm quite sure we will all talk again soon. Take care, gents, and thank you.
Cheers, guys.
Take care.
Nice.